Hey guys, David here from Guguda55 Tech Tutorials, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make an Ubuntu media server. Okay, so let's get started. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make a media server using Ubuntu Server, Plex, and Samba. Plex is going to be our actual media server itself, while we're going to use Samba to actually allow us to put the media files on the server. So anyways, I'm doing this running Ubuntu Server 14.04.1. This is currently the latest version of Ubuntu Server. However, the steps are the same for any version of Ubuntu Server. The first thing that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go ahead and download the Ubuntu Server ISO image, which I'll leave a link down in the description below. If you go to Ubuntu's website, the only option there is to download the 64-bit version. So I've also included a link below for Ubuntu Server 14.04.1, where you can also download the 32-bit version if that's what you need. Anyway, so once you've gone ahead and downloaded that and you've burned it to some sort of media, you can go ahead and boot up your computer into the ISO image, and you're just going to want to select Install Ubuntu Server. So it should go ahead and boot up into the installation, so I'm just going to choose my language, choose my country, territory, or area, and you can let it detect your keyboard layout if you're not sure what it is, but I already know I'm using an English US keyboard. And it's just going to start loading some additional stuff that it needs to continue with the installation. And it'll configure your network with DHCP automatically, and it'll ask you for a host name. Your host name is basically the name by which other computers on the network will see your server as. So for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to type in Ubuntu Media Server, and I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to ask you to create a user, so I'm just going to type in my name, username, and I'm going to make a password. When it asks you if you want to encrypt your home directory, you can click yes if the server is going to be storing important information, and you need that extra security to ensure that it doesn't get seen. However, I'm just doing this in a virtual machine, and I'm doing this installation just as a media server, so it doesn't really matter anyway, so I'm just going to hit no. Okay, it's going to ask you if your time zone is correct, and in my case it's not, so I'm just going to choose the closest city to me. And now we have to partition our hard drive. Now this is where a lot of people will disagree with me. Some people seem to think that you need a root partition, a swap partition, a home partition, and sometimes even more separate partitions for everything. However, I like to keep it simple and just go with one root partition and one swap partition. We're going to create those manually, but if you're not the best with partitioning, you can leave it at guided, use entire disk, and set up LVM. So I'm just going to select manual. I'm going to select my hard drive, and I need to create a new empty partition table. Okay, so it has created the free space, so I'm just going to hit the free space. Create a new partition, and I'm going to create the swap partition first so we can use the remaining space for the root partition. So I'm just going to make my swap partition 2 gigabytes. I'm going to hit continue. I'm going to make that a primary partition. I'm going to set it at the beginning of the partition table, and I'm going to use it as a swap area. I'm done setting up that partition. I'm going to go down to the rest of the free space. I'm going to create a new partition with the remaining space. I want that to be a primary partition, not a logical partition. I'm going to use the extension for journaling file system and mount it as root. And I'm going to set the bootable flag to on, just in case we want to install the bootloader to the root drive later. I'm going to hit done setting up the partition. And I'm going to finish partitioning and write changes to disk. It's going to ask you to confirm, just hit yes. And it's going to partition the disk, and then it's going to start installing the system. It's going to ask you for your HTTP proxy information. You can leave this blank and just hit continue unless you're using a proxy server to access the World Wide Web. It's going to start configuring apt and just getting some packages that it needs to continue with the installation. And it's going to go ahead and start installing the software. When it asks you how you want to manage updates, I recommend selecting Install Security Updates automatically. This will just ensure that your server always has the latest security patches. However, if you know what you're doing, you can go ahead and select No Automatic Updates or Manage System with Landscape. When it asks you what software you want to install, for now we're not going to install any software because it makes more sense to download the software from the repository so that we have the most up-to-date software available. However, you can go ahead and install OpenSSH Server if you want to manage the server remotely. Hit continue. Okay, and once it's done installing all the software, it's going to start installing the bootloader. And when it asks you if you want to install the grub bootloader to the master boot record, you're going to want to click no if you have other OSs installed on the system. If you click yes, it can mess up the other OS's bootloaders, and it'll make them very hard to boot. However, this is the only OS I'm installing on this computer, so I'm just going to hit yes. And once you get this prompt, just make sure that your installation media is taken out of the computer, and just hit continue. Okay, and the computer should reboot into the installed system. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to log in with the username and password that you created earlier. And before we do anything else, we're actually going to want to enable the root user. This will just keep us from having to run sudo in front of every command that we type in. So in order to enable the root user, all you have to do is type in sudo space passwd space root. Hit enter. It's going to ask for your password, so type that in. And now it's going to ask you for a new root password, so just type in a new password for the root user. And there you go. You have successfully enabled the root user, and you have also successfully installed Ubuntu server. Okay, so now we're going to go about actually configuring the server itself. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to log in as root, so we don't need to type in sudo in front of every command. So just type in su and hit enter. Type in the root password that we created and hit enter. And you are now logged in as root. A server should always have a static IP address. This is because it makes it a lot easier for us and other computers to access the server when the IP address isn't constantly changing. So this is the first thing that we're going to set up. So you're going to want to type in ifconfig and hit enter, and you should see a list of your network devices along with some information about them. In my case, I'm using an Ethernet device. You're going to want to take note of the IP address that you currently have, so in my case that is 192.168.1.112. Your broadcast or bcast number, so in my case 192.168.1.255, and your subnet mask, which in my case is 255.255.255.0. Once you've taken note of all that, we can go ahead and set up our static IP address. To do this, we have to edit the network interfaces file, and to do that, we're going to be using the VI editor. So just type in vi space /etc/network/interfaces and hit enter. You're going to want to go all the way down to where you see your network device, hit insert on your keyboard, and backspace the DHCP and change it to static. Hit enter, space, type in address, space, and we're going to type in our IP address, so in my case that was 192.168.1.112. Now you can make this something different, however it's easiest to use the IP address that the DHCP service of your router has given you. This is just because we don't want our IP address conflicting with another device that might have the same IP address on the network. If you're 100% certain that another IP address isn't in use on the network and you want to use that, you could go ahead and do that. Hit enter, hit space, type in broadcast, space, the bcast number, so 192.168.1.255 in my case. Hit enter, hit space, type in network, space, 192.168. The second last set of digits in your bcast number, so in my case that is a 1 because my broadcast is 192.168.1.255. So I'm just going to type in .1.0, enter, space, net mask, space, and this is your subnet mask, so 255.255.255.0, enter, space, gateway, space, and this is the IP address of your router, and in my case that is 192.168.1.1. If you're not sure what the IP address of your router is, common router IP addresses are 192.168.0.1, 192.168.1.1, and 192.168.2.1. This is also the IP address that you normally use to access the web administration page for your router. Once you've done that, hit enter, type space, DNS-name servers, space, the IP address of your router again, space, and we'll use Google DNS as a backup, so 8.8.8.8. Hit escape on your keyboard, type :WQ, and hit enter. Okay, now we need to restart the networking service, and the easiest way to do that is just to restart the server itself. Okay, so once you've restarted the server and you've logged in as root again, we're going to start installing the packages. The first thing that we need to do is type in apt-get space update. This will just update the repositories, and it also acts as a test to see if you configured your static IP address correctly. If it's able to fetch the repository data, you know that you did it correctly. Okay, once the server has updated the repositories, you can type in apt-get space upgrade. This will just upgrade all the packages on the system, just to make sure that we have all the latest packages that we need. And in my case, it says that there are 17 that can be upgraded, so I'm just going to type in Y and hit enter. Now this part might take a while depending on the number of packages that need to be updated, so just be patient. Okay, and once it's done upgrading the system, we're going to go in and install Samba. Samba isn't actually needed here. However, since we don't have a desktop environment on this computer, we can use it to access the server from another computer and put our media onto the server. If all your media is going to be stored on an external hard drive, you can skip this step completely. However, I'm assuming that if you're building the server, you want to store the media on the actual server's hard drive. So that's what we're going to use Samba for. So to install Samba, just type in apt-get space install space Samba. Hit enter. type in Y for yes. And again, this part might take a little while depending on the speed of your internet connection, so just be patient. Okay, so now that Samba is installed, we can create the folder and the share which we're going to use to store all of our media. So I'm just going to store everything in one folder, and we can add more folders to that folder afterwards from another operating system or another computer. So I'm just going to create a folder called Plex, since Plex is what we're using for our media server. So I'm just going to type mkdir to make directory, space, /plex. This will just make a folder called Plex on the root of the hard drive. Next, we need to set permissions on that folder so that when we try to connect to it, it does work. So to do that, just type in chmod space 777. So this is write read access for everybody. Space /Plex, and this will give read-write access to everybody. Okay, so now we need to edit the Samba configuration file so that it shares this folder and so that we can access it from other computers to add media to it. So in order to do this, we're just going to be using the VI editor, so type in VI space /etc /samba /smb.conf. Hit enter, go to where it says workgroup, hit insert on your keyboard, and change this to the name of the workgroup that the computers are on in your network. If you're not sure, in Windows you can right-click My Computer, go to Properties, and it'll show your workgroup there. My computers are on the workgroup Goguda. Now the next line that we're going to add, they used to have by default in Samba 3, however they've removed it in Samba 4, but I still think it's important, so I'm just going to hit enter, space, type in security equals user. Scroll down. We're going to uncomment when support equals no, and change it to yes. And this is another line of code that they have unfortunately removed in Samba 4. You can really put it anywhere in the configuration file, but I'm just going to put it under DNS proxy equals no. So you're going to want to type in name space resolve space order equals lm hosts host wins bcast. This line here just basically tells Samba how to connect a computer's IP address with its host name. Keep scrolling down, and once you're at the very end of the file, we can start defining our user shares. Since I do have another video on how to make an Ubuntu file server, I'm just going to be doing this quickly, but if you'd like a more in-depth description on how to set up Samba shares, you can go and watch that video, and I'll leave a link down in the description below. So anyways, we're going to name our share, so I'm just going to type in a square bracket. I'm going to name it Plex Media. Close the square bracket, hit enter, hit space. Comment equals just a general comment about the share, so Plex Media. Enter space path equals the path of the folder that we created, so in my case that was Plex in the root directory. Hit enter space browsable equals yes. Enter space read only equals no. Enter space, and one line that I didn't go over in my file server video is the guest OK line, which basically allows us to connect to the server without having to be logged in with a Samba user. So since this is just a media server, I don't want to have to deal with creating a bunch of Samba users and worrying about authentication when I'm trying to add media to the server. So I'm just going to type in guest OK equals yes. And this is going to allow anybody to access the Samba share. Once I've created the share, I'm just going to hit escape on the keyboard, type in :WQ to write and quit, and hit enter. Okay, so now we're going to go about actually installing the Plex media server itself. So first off, I'm just going to install some dependencies. So to do that, just type in apt-get space install space avahi-daemon space avahi-utils. The avahi package just allows us to actually see the Plex server on the network. So once you've typed that in, just hit enter, type Y for yes, and it'll go ahead and download and install those. Okay, so since Plex Media Server isn't in any sort of repositories, we're going to need another computer or some sort of other device that is capable of going on the internet so that we can go to Plex's website itself and check what the link is to download the newest package so that we can download it on the server itself. So to do this, just go to plex.tv, go to their download section, choose Plex Media Server for the computer, choose Linux, and under Ubuntu, the steps are the same whether or not you're running the 32-bit version or the 64-bit version. I'm running the 64-bit version, so I'm just going to right-click on the 64-bit button. And I'm just going to choose copy link address, and I'm just going to paste it into a text editor just so that I have the link address. So what we just did there is we got the link to the actual package itself. Once you've taken note of that, you could go back to your server. Okay, so now on the server, to download the package that we just got the link for, we're going to type in wget space and then type in the link. Now this link is quite long, but you're going to want to make sure that you type it in exactly the way that you got it, because if it's not the exact same spelling in terms of capitals or even just periods, stuff like that, it's not going to work. So you need to make sure that you type in the link exactly the way that it is shown. Okay, so I've gone ahead and typed in the full link and I've verified that it is correct, so I'm just going to hit enter. and it'll go ahead and start downloading the package. Okay, so once the package is downloaded, it should give you the name that it was saved by, and so we're going to go ahead and install the package, so dpkg space -i space, and then the name of the package. So if I look above, it says it's Plex, and it'll go ahead and start installing the package. If you got no errors, it has installed successfully, and we're going to need to restart the server so that our Plex Media server and our Samba server get restarted. Okay, so this is where we're actually going to be using that Samba share that we set up to get our media files onto the server. Like I said earlier, if you're using an external hard drive for your media, you can skip ahead to the part where I'm showing the web app for Plex, and I'm actually bringing everything into the Plex Media server. That being said, if your media is on an external hard drive, you're going to want to make sure that it's as organized as possible, like I'm going to explain in just a second. Okay, so to connect to the Samba share, you're going to need another computer with a desktop environment, Windows, Mac, or Linux, it doesn't matter. Again, since I do have a video on how to make an Ubuntu file server where I show you how to connect to these Samba shares, I'm just going to be connecting really quickly. It is pretty straightforward, but if you're not sure how to do it, you can go ahead and click on the link down in the description below and go check it out for yourself. So on my Mac, I'm just going to go connect to server. I have the server's IP address in there. I'm just going to connect as a guest since we use the guest OK option in Samba. That should be fine. And you can see it's asking me which volume I want to mount. You can see our Plex Media shares there. And I'm going to start creating folders for each different type of media. It's important to have separate folders for each different type of media. Ultimately, it is up to you how you organize your media server. However, this is the way that most people do it. So I'm going to have one for movies, TV shows, pictures, and music. Okay, and within each folder, you're probably going to want to organize even more just so that your media server is nice and organized and you can find what you want easily. What I mean by that is, for example, in TV shows, you're most likely going to want to have separate folders for each show, and then possibly even separate folders for each season. With music, separate folders for each artist, and separate folders for each album. I'm sure that you could get the idea with pictures and movies too. So once you've created as many folders as you'd like for the different types of media you have, you can just go ahead and move your media over to the server. So I have a movie copying over right now. I'm going to bring some music over to the server. Some pictures. And you can see here that everything is copying quite quickly, and this is over a Wi-Fi connection. So if you're on a wired connection, it should be even faster. Once all of your media is brought over to the server and you're happy with the way it's organized, you can disconnect from the Samba share, and we're going to go ahead and go to the Plex web app. To get to the Plex web app on any computer with a web browser on your network, you can go up to the address bar, type in the IP address of your server, so in my case that is 192.168.1.112, type in colon, and you want to connect to port 32,400. So just type in 32,400/web to get to the web interface. Hit enter, and the Plex web interface should come up. The Plex web interface is used to set up the actual Plex server itself. It's also a way, though not the only way, to access your media. So keep this link in mind because it is pretty important for your media server. You can agree to the terms of service, and you should see the plus button over here. This is how you add new media to the server. So just click that. It's going to ask you what type of media it is. So I'll just start off with movies. And to add your folder, you can hit add folder. As you saw earlier, I created a folder called Plex, and that's the folder that we added our media to from the Samba share. So I'm going to go into Plex, and you can see the movie folder right here. So I'll click that, I'll hit add, and I'll just hit add library. It'll start scanning the section, and it should detect the media automatically. Plex will also download information about the media that you put on the server from its own servers, such as the year, along with title and producers, and even cover art. So I added my movies folder, so I'm just going to keep adding. So I have my TV shows, again in the Plex folder. I'm going to hit add, and I'm just going to add that to the library. Again, I'm going to do it for music. And one thing that I should mention is if you're using an external hard drive to store your media, you're going to have to mount it through the terminal once you plug it into the server. You can then access the media in the same way that I'm accessing it here, through wherever you mounted it. I recommend mounting it to this media folder here. That's what this is really meant for. Again, so I'm adding music this time, so I'm going to go down to Plex, music, hit add, and again you can see that it has gone ahead and fetched some stuff from its own servers. And finally, I'm just going to add the pictures. So photos, and that's how you can add media to your server. I'm going to be showing you a few ways that you can access the media on your server. The first way is just simply by using the web app. The web app can be accessed from any Mac, Linux, or Windows computer, as long as the computer is connected to the same network as your server. The interface is quite nice, and all of your media is accessible and playable through the web app itself. Some people have also configured this so that their media is accessible remotely through the web app. The second way is by going to Plex's website, plex.tv, and downloading the Plex Home Theater application for either your Windows, Mac, or Linux computers. This will give you an interface similar to Windows Media Center, and it automatically detects your Plex server on the network. This is great for computers both designated as a media center and just your normal desktop computer. It's also free to download and to use. The third way isn't necessarily Plex specific, and it's not that pretty, but it does work. Windows will actually automatically detect Plex as a media server, so you could go in and all your media will be sorted because Plex did sort it, and you can just play your media this way. The fourth way is to download the Plex app on your mobile device or on your media center box, such as a Roku on the TV. The downside of these apps is that most of them aren't free, and the ones especially on mobile devices can get quite pricey at about $5. I'm sure that those are just a few of the numerous ways that you can access the media on this server. These are just the most practical in my opinion. So thanks for watching, and I hope I helped. If you like this video, don't forget to click the like button down below. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe for more, and also don't forget to check out my Facebook and Twitter page. Also don't forget to check out my website at www.googooda55techtutorials.com. All the links are in the description below.